You are listening to the Fleaflicker podcast.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Fleaflicker NFL Show. I am your host, Umar, and we're just gonna jump right into it. I have some fun stuff to talk about today. I want to talk about the Brandin Cooks trade. He was traded from the LA Rams to the Houston Texans. I want to do a breakdown on the Cincinnati Bengals and the moves that they've done during the offseason. And I want to talk a little bit about Joe Burrow and why I think the Bengals should keep Andy Dalton and start Andy Dalton to start the 2020 NFL season. And I want to talk a little bit about some other things. Mainly, I want to talk about why I think the NFL draft should be pushed back. So yeah, should be a fun show. Awesome. Let's jump right into it. So yeah, let's just jump right into it. Got my notes for the trade right here. So the Houston Texans traded for wide receiver Brandin Cooks and a 4th-round pick, and in exchange they gave up a 2020 second-round pick. And honestly, for me, this is sort of an L on both sides. Both teams, it wasn't a good move for both teams. It was definitely the better move for the Rams, I think. But the way I see it, the Rams pretty much just accepted failure. I want to jump into the Rams aspect of this trade first to start off. If you want to see how to build a poor franchise, you got to do what Les Snead, the GM of the LA Rams, is doing right now. Just follow whatever he's doing, and you're going to see exactly how to build a bad team. So, following the 2018 NFL season, that was the season where the LA Rams obviously went to the Super Bowl. Following that, they gave out huge contracts to running back Todd Gurley and wide receiver Brandin Cooks. Now, as of April 10th, which was yesterday, both those players are no longer on the team. And that's admitting failure. They gave a big contract to Gurley, who's a running back. You should never pay a running back. And they also gave a big contract to Cooks, and now he's not even on the team. The way the Rams have built their team is very questionable. They've traded away future assets. They traded away 2 first-round picks. They don't have a first-round pick in this draft. They don't have a first-round pick in the 2021 draft for cornerback Jalen Ramsey. They're going to have to pay Jalen Ramsey a ton of money because they traded so much for him. And they don't really have a good situation there. They don't have good leverage. He's going to demand a ton of money. They can't really do much because they gave up so much to get him. It would be a shame if you got rid of him for pretty much a 2-year rental. They have spent a ton of money on Jared Goff, Todd Gurley, Brandin Cooks, on players like Aaron Donald. Now they're going to have to spend money on Jalen Ramsey. They're spending a ton of money. They're giving away all their draft picks. And in doing so, they don't have a future. And that's one of the reasons why they traded away Cooks. They're saving money for it, which is a positive. And you're getting rare draft capital for a team that doesn't have draft capital to begin with. So if I'm looking at a winner and a loser for this trade, the Rams definitely won this trade just because they're improving their team by a pretty significant margin. They still have a ton of dead money. They have $21.8 million in dead cap for the 2020 season. And including the Todd Gurley dead cap, that means they're paying $33 million for players who are no longer on their team. So that's just a huge flaw. I think they're going to start leaning more on 12 personnel. When they started using Gerald Everett and having him and Tyler Higbee on the field at the same time, their offense started clicking again to end of the season. Now you're not going to really have to make a choice between kicking Cooper Kupp or either one of Cooper Kupp, Brandin Cooks, and Robert Woods off the field. You don't have to worry about that anymore. You can just kick off one of them, and you are fine. You don't have to worry about it because you don't have one of those big three on your team anymore. And you got pretty solid draft capital in a draft class that is pretty rich with wide receivers. You could get someone like a Laviska Shenault from Colorado, potentially someone like Brandon Ayuk could fall, T. Higgins from Clemson. You could get someone like Joan Rager from TSU, or someone like a speedster like KJ Hamler from Penn State. You can get all of those receivers there, and if you draft a receiver, which I think the Rams could very well do in the second round of this year's class, of this deep class, you're saving a ton of money for the future because they don't need a big contract. They're going to be paid very little money compared to what Brandin Cooks is getting paid. So if I'm looking at a winner or a loser from this trade, I think the Rams were definitely a winner. Now, when I look at the Texans, they gave up a ton of draft capital for a wide receiver who is honestly potentially one concussion away from potentially retiring from the NFL. His career could be over with one more concussion. And the fact is, you gave up a second-round pick, and you also traded away DeAndre Hopkins for a second-round pick. So you're almost equating DeAndre Hopkins at his contract to Brandin Cooks on his contract. And the contracts are pretty similar, and DeAndre Hopkins is significantly better. So you could make the argument that, the Texans are in win-now mode. That's why they gave up draft capital for a risky move that could potentially work out and all that. But trading away DeAndre Hopkins means that you're not in a win-now mode. This move is very questionable. It seems that some people might think that the Texans are playing like 4D chess or something out here, but they're just making bad moves. They are going to spend, for the next 2 years, they're going to spend $38 million for both Brandin Cooks and Randall Cobb. That's a lot of money to invest in two players. I'm pretty sure you would 100% like to have DeAndre Hopkins instead of Brandin Cooks and Randall Cobb on your team. They give up some pretty big draft capital in a deep class. All the guys I just named before for the Rams that they could potentially draft. You can't draft that now if you're the Texans. And honestly, it seems like you're getting a ton of slot with wide receivers and Randall Cobb and Kenny Stills and Brandin Cooks. I guess you have Will Fuller, who's a speedster, but he's kind of not lived up to the hype, mainly due to injury. And it's just a very questionable move if I am the Texans. So if I'm looking at a winner or a loser, I think the Rams are definitely a winner here. The Texans are definitely a loser. And yeah, we should see what the next knuckleheaded move Bill O'Brien makes for the Texans. Now I want to do a deep dive into the moves that the Cincinnati Bengals, the first team, the worst team last year in the NFL, and the holders of the first overall pick. I want to look into some of the moves that team made, and I want to do a quick Bengals analysis. I'm planning on doing this for all 32 teams. I don't know if it's going to happen, but that is my goal for the next 2 weeks before the draft happens. So let's dive right into it. The biggest signing they made was arguably franchise tagging AJ Green. They're spending about $18 million on him to keep him on the team. And this is going to be a great safety blanket for quarterback Joe Burrow, the expected first overall pick. And honestly, you're going to need one if you're a rookie quarterback. AJ Green, yes, he's not the same player. Obviously, he hasn't played in a year and a half pretty much now. But if he can even play at like 70% of the potential he has, he's going to be a baller for the Bengals. And hopefully Joe Burrow gets one of those stud players. It was reported that Joe Burrow requested that AJ Green stay on the team, and that would increase his chances of playing for the Bengals. I don't know how much weight you'd put into a report like that, but that was reported. They kept him. You got potentially a stud on the outside at wide receiver one, AJ Green. People forget, but AJ Green had 5 consecutive seasons of 1,000 yards, I believe it was. and he was about to beat the record before he started getting injuries. This man's a stud. He was right up there with Antonio Brown and Julio Jones and Calvin Johnson. He was up there with all those wide receivers. Within the last decade itself, when he was drafted in 2010 or 2011, I believe, with Julio Jones, he and Julio were probably the best wide receivers in the last 10 years. He and probably include Antonio Brown. He's right up there. That's probably one of the best moves you could have made if you were the Bengals. Now, looking at outside free agency signings, they signed defensive tackle DJ Reader from the Houston Texans for 4 years, $53 million. And for me, this is all these moves, franchise tagging Adrian for that much money, paying DJ Reader a ton of money as a defensive tackle. It shows me one thing that gives me hope for the Bengals, and hope that maybe Mike Brown isn't just a complete bum. He's potentially building something very good for that team. And that's the fact that they're spending money. They're spending $53 million, $18 million with the green. They just spent way more. I believe they spent around $150 million for future contracts on the defensive side of the ball. That's a ton of money. They might be changing the culture down there in Cincinnati if they're signing big money guys, which is something that Mike Brown and the Bengals have been notorious for skipping out and watching from the sidelines as these guys want to be paid more money, get bought out by other teams. They stand on the sideline and they don't invest in that talent pool. Now they are doing that, and a team previously that was like that as of last offseason, they changed that philosophy, was the Green Bay Packers. They were also notorious for not spending in free agency. They would go hard in the draft. They would draft good players, and that was how they built their teams. And they let players walk unless they were like Aaron Rodgers caliber. You'd let those players walk after the rookie deals. But last year they signed Preston Brown and Zadarius Smith and Adrian Amos. They signed these big money guys, and lo and behold, they made the NFC Championship game. Yes, drafting is important. It's almost more important than free agency. But spending more on free agency is also a pretty key thing you need to do. There has to be a balance. You can't just go all in on the draft and not spend in free agency. You need to balance the talent pool. And what they did with DJ Reader, you are going to pair him with Geno Atkins. And that's most likely going to be the second or third ranked defensive tackle combo in the league, potentially first. Maybe Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave from the Philadelphia Eagles, maybe Aaron Donald and whoever else they line up at defensive tackle, because Aaron Donald's a whole different level when it comes to defensive tackle. But DJ Reader and Geno Atkins, you are shoring up that defensive line. And if you look at how this team is built, you have defensive line and Carl Lawson, Carlos Dunlap. You also have third-year player now, Sam Hubbard, former third-round pick. You have those three studs rotating in and out. You have two stud defensive tackles. My only problem with this defensive line is the fact that they have A-class talent, probably B-class talent. I mean, I wouldn't name a defensive line. There's not many defensive lines I'd take over that, the starting 4, starting 5, whatever it is. But the only problem is you don't have much depth. If these guys get injured, you don't have much behind Geno Atkins and DJ Reader and Carlos Dunlap and all these players. So depth is definitely an issue here. Probably something you might want to look at later in the draft. I don't think it's a huge priority, but it's definitely something you need to focus on. So moving on, they also signed 2 former Vikings players, Trey Waynes, the cornerback, and Mackenzie Alexander, the slot cornerback. Trey Waynes was given a 3-year, $42 million deal, and Mackenzie Alexander was given a 1-year, $4 million deal. And again, this is good for the team. They're spending big money on players. They lost Darqueze Dennard and Dre Kirkpatrick this offseason. Cornerback was a position they needed to look at. They have William Jackson. Now they have Trey Waynes starting on the opposite side. Trey Waynes is a high motor guy. He's lanky. He has speed. He's inconsistent to say the least, I'd say. He's not perfect. He's not like a lockdown guy, but he is definitely an above average cornerback, in my opinion. Maybe average, but he's in that zone where he's going to help you more than he hurts you. And if you look at Mackenzie Alexander, the other slot corner, he hasn't missed a tackle in, I believe, 142 run attempts. He is a sure tackler, which is something you need from the slot cornerback, and he's only getting paid $4 million a year. You are making bargain deals here. You are shoring up the position. You're getting Mackenzie Alexander to replace Darqueze Dennard. You're getting Dre Kirkpatrick's replacement right here now in Trey Waynes. Those are both good players to load up on for your team. They also ended up signing offensive guard Xavier Su'a-Filo. Their offensive line was 27th. It was the 27th offensive line according to PFF. They are working on fixing that with Xavier Su'a-Filo. They're going to get back Jonah Williams, the former first-round pick from last year who tore his ACL. He's going to be a stud out there at left tackle, right tackle, wherever you play him. You're shoring up your offensive line. You're getting back Billy Price, who's hopefully looking to take a step forward. You have lots of other guys on that offensive line. You have Michael Jordan, who you signed. You have Trey Hopkins, who was playing the center spot, I believe. Fred Johnson, another solid tackle. Yes, these aren't household names. These aren't elite of elite guys, but the fact is they're putting draft capital and now they're putting money. They're putting those resources right into the offensive line, right into it, trying to fix that position. And the only way you can fix it is by putting money and putting draft picks into it, and that is what they are doing. I can't really complain. Yes, you're going to have busts here and there. Yes, the offensive line is probably not going to be much better, but the way I look at it, it's rising. It couldn't get much worse either, to be honest. Looking at some other guys, they signed Ravens linebacker Josh Bynes to a one-year deal. I want to hit on this later, but the linebacker position is the Achilles heel for this team. It's the Achilles heel for the Cincinnati Bengals. They don't have anyone. They have Jermaine Pratt, and they lost Nick Vigil. Vigil, I believe his name is. He signed with another team. They lost that in free agency. Josh Bynes is a good special teams guy, and you don't have anyone else on that team who played more than 8 or 9% of the snaps at linebacker other than Jermaine Pratt, who came in around midseason. Even if Josh Bynes isn't a stud, you just need to bring in bodies. So I don't see a huge problem with this move. Now, another huge move. They signed former New Orleans Saints safety Von Bell to a 3-year deal. That could potentially push the other safety, Sean Williams, out of the rotation. However, I think they're going to put him down at the linebacker spot, make him play sort of a sub-linebacker because of how weak their linebackers are. Von Bell is another pretty good player. He asked for a ton of money, which is why he didn't go back to New Orleans. But you're paying big money for another guy. That's another trend I'm seeing. You're paying big money, which you weren't doing before. Von Bell is a good player. You're pairing him up with third-year safety Jesse Bates. And you're pretty much making a pretty elite back end of the defensive end back here. You got Von Bell, Sean Williams, not Jermaine Pratt. You got Jesse Bates. You got Trey Waynes. You have Mackenzie Alexander, William Jackson. That's a pretty solid secondary. I don't think it's a crazy elite secondary by no means, but it's a solid secondary, and you are improving as a team. That's what you're doing. And they signed up a backup corner from the Titans. His name is LaShawn Sims. I don't know much about him, but his team made the playoffs. And talking about the playoffs, DJ Reed, defensive tackle for the Texans, they made the playoffs last season. Trey Waynes, Vikings, made this playoffs last season. Same thing with Mackenzie Alexander. They made the playoffs with the Vikings as well. Josh Bynes was with the Ravens. They made the playoffs. Von Bell, playoffs. LaShawn Sims, playoffs. That's six players that you brought in that made the playoffs. When you're looking at how to rebuild a team, you need a culture shift. You're getting a winning mentality, and you're bringing that right into your locker room. We got guys who've won it before. They've gone through playoff success. They've gone through a playoff failure. You've got guys who are they had that playoff experience. That's key for a young team, and that's what this team is about to be. You don't have much playoff experience, and you're bringing that back into the locker room by signing all of these guys. And that's why I think the Bengals are on the up and up right now. They're signing big money guys. And yes, there's big risk for that. If you're signing a guy like DJ Reader and it doesn't work out, you could potentially be stunting your growth. You're going to probably be stunting your ability to go out and sign future guys. You're going to be like, oh, it failed one time. Why should I do it again? If I'm Mike Brown and I went all out this one year and guess what? It stops working. I'm going to be like, I spent so much money and it didn't work. Is it worth doing it? But the fact is that they're willing to go out on the limb. They're willing to spend money. They're willing to go out and sign these playoff guys. They're willing to bring back A.J. Green. They're doing all of this. And if I'm looking at the biggest flaw of this team, I'm going to look at the defensive side. They were 32nd in rushing yards allowed. For those of you who don't know, there are 32 teams in the NFL, and the Bengals are 32nd when it comes to rushing yards allowed with 148.9 yards allowed. That's dead last. If you look at their tackles list, the guys who were leading in all the tackles, it was Sean Williams, a safety, and Jesse Bates, a safety. The worst thing you want is two safeties leading your team in tackles. That means that your defensive line and your linebackers, most likely your linebackers, are not doing their job properly. And the fact is, you don't want that to happen. That's happened in the last 2 years. Your safeties are leading your team in tackles. That is not good. Also, looking at another thing, over the last 3 years, I believe it is, they have allowed the most rushing attempts in the league. So that means teams are just running all over them compared to the 20th most passes. When you have a pretty solid to potentially elite defensive line, and even better now with DJ Reader, you want enemy teams, opposing teams, you want them to pass more. You want to unlock that pass rush. You want them to go after the quarterback because that's how you build good teams. Look at the Philadelphia Eagles in 2017, ferocious pass rush. 2018 with the Aaron Donald-led Rams, ferocious pass rush. Look at all the Patriots teams that made the Super Bowl. Most of them had pretty good pass rushes, or at least they were getting good sacks and good pressure on the quarterback. That's a key to rebuilding a team. It's the lines, offensive line and defensive line. And the Achilles heel for this team is the linebacker position. Nick Vigil went to the Chargers. Jermaine Pat's pretty much your only linebacker that's played more than like 8 or 9% of the snaps. Now you brought on just Josh Bynes. The Achilles heel of this team is the fact that they're getting run all over. If you can stop that, you can unlock that pass rush. You can get a better pass rush rotation going. You can get a bit more pressure on the quarterback for the opposing team. You could be allowing less rushing yards, which means that the other team is not controlling the game flow of the game. Fixing the linebacker position is the number one priority for this team, even more than signing Joe Burrow or drafting Joe Burrow, which they're going to do no matter what. But the best thing you could do right now is fix the linebacker position. Sean Williams is a decent sub-linebacker, but you don't have anyone outside. You lost Vontaze Burfict, and besides, he's a bum anyway, but you need someone to replace that. And when I look at this offense for the Bengals, they have Joe Mixon. They have Giovanni Bernard. They have players like not Kenneth Murray. They got players like obviously John Ross, who's a speedster, and I believe he caught 26 balls last year for 500 yards in 8 games. That's unlocking the deep ball for sure. He's a big play waiting to happen. He needs to stay healthy, but when he was on the field, he was making plays. AJ Green, you're getting him back. You're getting Auden Tate back, who's a former rookie who was pretty good. He's 6'5", pretty good jump ball guy. That's another good target you want for a quarterback like Joe Burrow, a rookie. You're also keeping the other guy you previously had, former 1,000-yard receiver in multiple seasons, Tyler Boyd. And he's a great wide receiver to have on your team. He's had multiple 1,000-yard seasons. He's pretty underrated, actually, when I think about it. And he is another good guy. You have good offensive weapons. You have Joe Mixon, Giovanni Bernard. You have these guys. All these guys are the good things you want around your quarterback. The biggest question here is obviously Zach Taylor, the head coach, whether or not he's going to mesh well with Joe Burrow, whether or not he can come up with a good scheme for Joe Burrow. That's the biggest question on the offense. But looking from a talent perspective, you're not that bad. I think some things they should prioritize. I think if linebacker Kenneth Murray or Patrick Queen or Logan Wilson potentially drop to you in the second round, you have to pick that. You have to get those run stoppers or someone who you need to get some linebacking talent in that team. That's the biggest Achilles heel. Obviously, you should go Joe Burrow. I think you should also focus on offensive tackle with potentially maybe Josh Jones, the tackle from Houston, following, or Lucas Nyang, I believe his name is. I think you also need to focus on wide receiver in this draft. So look for an AJ Green successor, someone like maybe Chase Claypool or Donovan Peoples-Jones, someone like that. Those are the four biggest things I think the Bengals need to work on. And honestly, when I went into this doing this breakdown, I didn't think I was going to be impressed, and I kind of am impressed. They brought in some good veteran leadership, some playoff winners. They have some offensive talent on that team. They have one big flaw, I think, on the defensive side of the ball. If they can fix that being the linebacker position, and if they can stop the run, this defense could be pretty solid for this team. And Zach Taylor is the biggest question on the offensive side of the ball. If that can work out, Joe Burrow and the Bengals could very well be flying. So it's nothing but positive things for me right now for the Bengals. So, as everyone knows, Corona time is currently happening. That's obviously not a good thing, but that being said, with Corona time happening, everyone's in quarantine, right? And because of this, all OTAs, all training camps have been canceled for the NFL season, coming 2020 NFL season. All those are skadoosh, they're gone, right? So when you're looking at what you should do as a team, if I am the Cincinnati Bengals, I'm keeping Andy Dalton. I'm not trading him, and I'm making him start to begin the NFL season. And you may ask why? Like, why would you ever do that? What are you aiming? What are you achieving from that? You should start your quarterback immediately. And to those people, I say, yeah, I think you should. If you look at like a quarterback like Carson Wentz or Deshaun Watson, these guys were heavily successful because they were started in the first year. They got that nice first-year development going, and they have been pretty successful throughout their careers, right? But on the flip side, I'm going to go back to 2011 when the lockout happened. And during this lockout, this is the last time the NFL off-season was interrupted. You didn't have training camps or anything of that. And a quarterback like Colt McCoy, who was drafted for the Browns, I believe, that year, he was thrust into the starting role. He didn't have any experience, didn't really know the playbook well. He didn't have any time to throw to his receivers, and he flopped. He flopped everyone. And now you're going to have a repeat. Joe Burrow is going to go in. He's probably doing Zoom calls maybe with Zach Taylor to try to get the offensive system going. I don't think he's going to be throwing much to his go-to guys and AJ Green and Tyler Boyd. He's not going to be throwing to these guys like John Ross and Auden Tate, CJ Uzomah, all these guys. He's not going to be throwing to them. Drew Sample, the other tight end. He's not going to be throwing to them. And that's going to be a huge detriment. As a quarterback, you need to have that good timing down. You need to be able to get those timing routes like slants and corners and curls. You need to get those done. You need to know the tendencies of, AJ Green runs an out route like this versus how John Ross runs it. You can't do that if you're Joe Burrow and you don't have an offseason program. So if I am the Cincinnati Bengals, I'm going to sit Joe Burrow back. I'm going to give him as much time as possible to learn the offense. He's a smart guy. I think he'll catch up with it pretty quickly. But to thrust him into a starting role, and with him probably not having mastered the offense because he's not going to have much time and much practice to master it, I think that's a huge mistake. If I am the Cincinnati Bengals, I will start Andy Dalton to start the year. I will let Joe Burrow get some practice time in, let him build some chemistry with these guys before thrusting him in. But I do not want a repeat of Colt McCoy in 2011. I want Joe Burrow to work, and because of that, I think that Andy Dalton should start the 2020 NFL season over Joe Burrow. Now, when I was doing I did a Bengals breakdown, right? And when doing this, I was looking at the running back position, and I noticed a guy that I hadn't really thought of in pretty much a year, and this guy was Rodney Anderson, former running back for Oklahoma, former teammate of starting running back Joe Mixon, and people don't know much about him. He tore his ACL twice in the last 2 years, early in his senior year in college, and he also tore it in a preseason game, and it was the same ACL. So he is he's not playing, obviously. He's in rehab currently. He's a pretty physical guy, though. He has good talent. He had like 200 yards in the Rose Bowl game. He's a stud running back. If he was not injured, he probably would have been potentially a first-round pick, potentially the first running back off the board. And obviously he couldn't do that because, as everyone knows, he was injured. So, looking at Rodney Anderson, I can't think of anything but optimism, in all honesty. So, the director of rehab for the Cincinnati Bengals, it's a guy named Nick Cosgray. I believe, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. He posted something, or he gave a quote about Rodney Anderson, about his rehab. And obviously, you know what, tearing an ACL, dude, I had ankle injuries when I was a little bit younger than I am right now, and it sucked. Like, every time I'd run, I would twist my ankle, and I'd be like, dang, I'm just trying to play basketball, man. Like, I'm just trying to have fun, like, trying to, play football with my friends, whatever it is. And I can't do that because I'm injured all the time. My ankle always rolls, and it's always sprained, and it sucks. This guy tore his ACL twice, which is like 150, 2,000, whatever, way worse than whatever sprains I had. And so the director of rehab, he says this about Rodney Anderson. A lot of guys might have said after all that being the ACL tears, this just isn't for me. And that never crossed his mind, him being Rodney Anderson. Rodney Anderson is the story of a guy who is crazy hardworking, man. He's going into the draft, he tore his ACL and he was 5 months out. He was saying he's going to try to run the 40. Even if he could run like a 4.7 or 4.8, that would help his draft stock. And this is 5 months after surgery. He trained all that. And he thinks, and so does the director of rehab, they think that him unnecessarily pushing himself is what caused the re-tear and caused the re-injury. His knee was never fully back to health. And talking about that, Rodney Anderson's a baller, dude. He was a stud in college. In all the meetings he's ever had, he's always just been a great guy. He's a smart guy. And he's a story of someone you need to have in times like this where you're stuck at home. You need a story of hope. Rodney Anderson, I don't know if he's going to recover from this rehab. Not many players do. There are a few players, thinking of a running back like Adrian Peterson who recovered from a toe ACL. They are players who do it. And I don't know if Rodney Anderson's going to be one of those. He's a former 6th-round pick. I don't know if he's going to be one of those, but it's a story of hope, and it's a story that I really, really like. I don't know if he's going to do it, man. Like, he might never play an NFL down in his career. He might be a complete bust, or whatever bust you can be for a 6th-round pick. But I just feel like giving him some airtime. Obviously, this is a small podcast. Not many people listen to it, but he's a guy I really like. I think he could potentially be a baller if he gets healthy, which I think he will be. His rehab's ahead of schedule. If he can do that, I think Rodney Anderson's someone worth watching, someone who could potentially supplant Giovanni Bernard and be that running back 2 behind Joe Mixon. I don't know if it's going to happen, but if it does, it will be fun. And yeah, I'm gonna take a break, you guys. I'm getting kind of tired right now, thirsty, and I will be right back. And I am back. Water's a great drink, everyone. Like, I don't know if you've tried this drink. It's a clear drink. Doesn't really have a taste, but super refreshing. And after you've talked for like 35 minutes, I don't think there's anything better than it. So, yeah, everyone drink water. Would recommend 10 out of 10. So, the NFL released their all-decades team for the 2010s, I believe it is, that decade. And the quarterbacks that made it were obviously Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, the quarterback for the Packers. And lots of people were mad because Drew Brees was apparently snubbed from this list. And people were saying Drew Brees should have made it. And I saw lots of people saying that this list is completely nonsense and factually, like, they were stating things like Drew Brees is factually a better quarterback and he deserves to be on this list over Rodgers. And there was a huge argument I was seeing. People were using opinions as facts, and it made no sense to me. They were saying stuff like, oh, Drew Brees is 100% better than Aaron Rodgers, and that is a fact. You can't compare the two. Anyone who does is like boneheaded. They're stupid. Your opinion doesn't matter. They were saying stuff like that. And I just want to look something up real quick for everyone. I'm going to do this live because I haven't done it before because I'm literally too slow. But let's look it up. The dictionary definition of a fact: a thing that is known or proved to be true. Now, if I look at the definition of opinion, it is a view or judgment formed about something, not necessarily based on fact or knowledge. Not necessarily based on fact. Not necessarily based on fact. And a fact is something that is widely known. It cannot be disputed. So a fact would be that Tom Brady now plays on the Buccaneers. Or a fact would be that Patrick Mahomes threw for 50 touchdowns in 2018. A fact would not be that Aaron Rodgers is the worst quarterback than Drew Brees. That is an opinion-based question, opinion-based response. And it just really frustrated me. People don't know the difference between opinions and facts, and I feel like it's pretty simple. You can't be using opinions and using them as facts. Facts are numbers. They're solid points. They're stuff that can't be debated. An opinion can be debated. And while I think that Rodgers definitely deserved to make this list over Brees, people have the right to the opinion that saying Brees was snubbed. However, it's not a fact that Brees deserved to be on the list more than Aaron Rodgers. It was an opinion. And I don't know, opinions versus facts. I think it's something that's basic that people, especially people who talk about sports, should know about. But you just get mindless bickering and nonsense. And it's just something I wanted to talk about and touch about really quick. The NFL draft should be pushed back. For those of you who don't know, we live in a pretty dark world right now. Everything sort of sucks. Everyone's quarantined. There's a virus going around killing people. And because of this, pro days have been canceled. Teams are no longer able to physically sit down with prospects. They aren't able to do any of that, really. The draft process is kind of messed up. You can't get players to work out. I saw a video of, I forget who it was, but some teams were asking for Jalen Reagor, the wide receiver from TCO. They're asking for him to do a pro day and record it. And it's so sketchy. He ran like a 4.22 and like a 4.28 on the 40 and all this. And I don't think it's a good way to... You can't just see a recording of someone running routes and be like, oh, yeah, those look like good routes. Now you have to, actually watch him run the routes, and you're not able to do that. You're not really able to physically sit down with players. You're not able to get them into your facilities. You're not able to do physicals on these guys. Someone like Cam Newton might have already been signed, but he's not going to be, or at least not anytime soon and before the draft, because his injury status is up in the air. Someone like Tua Tagovailoa, who fractured his hip. He's already failed two physicals according to two teams, and he can't do anything. He can't get physically tested much more because he's not allowed to. He's not. Teams aren't allowed to have direct contact with him, and also the draft should be postponed just because technological issues. What if I'm sure there are contingency plans, but what if someone's Wi-Fi goes out? What if you can't talk? What if someone's call gets hacked? How are you gonna broadcast this to people? What are you gonna do about draft prospects? I'm sure it could be sort of like a fantasy draft, like a fantasy football draft, but you're trying to make this into a spectacle, and in doing so, it's not gonna work. I think there's lots of room for error. There's lots of stuff that could go wrong. You're depending so heavily on technology, and you're not getting a full picture on how good a prospect truly is. And because of that, I think there's going to be a lot of stud players who are going to slip between the cracks. They're going to be completely missed out because teams they can't do their due diligence on everyone. You're going to have your head coach and your GM sitting in completely opposite corners of the city now. They're probably not going to be sitting in the same spot. You're going to have scouts and everyone split up in their own homes. I think it's going to be a mess. Obviously, I want the draft to happen right now because sports not happening right now kind of sucks. I love to just sit down and watch some football, or I'd love to see some basketball, whatever it is. And the fact is the NFL draft is normalcy. It's normal to have the draft, and I want the draft to happen, but I think just looking at it logically, I think the draft should be pushed back. Lots of stuff could go wrong. Prospects are going to get missed on. You don't have pro days. You don't have any of that, clinicals, physicals. Because of all that, I think the NFL draft should be pushed back. There's just way too much room for error. And the draft it's going to be fun, but I think it's going to be a mess this year. So we'll see what happens. The NFL will not have OTAs. They will not have training camp this year. The fact is they might not even have an NFL season. We don't know what's going on there with the NFL this year. There is a lot that could or could not happen, and we are not sure about any of that. So, because of that, I think there's a few teams that have a distinct advantage over other teams, or just teams that I'm interested to look at. And because the fact is you're not going to have a full off season, I think the teams with the biggest advantage, and there's only one team that really jumps to my mind, is the Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles do not have an excuse to not make the playoffs this year. The rest of the head coaches, the other three teams, being the Giants, the Redskins, and the Cowboys, they all have new head coaches. Mike McCarthy for the Cowboys, Joe Judge for the Giants, and Ron Rivera for the Redskins. You have young quarterbacks learning new offensive systems. You have lots of things that could potentially go wrong for all those teams. The fact is, if you're a quarterback like Dak, you're not able to throw to your guys. You're not getting the offseason work in. You're not able to really learn that offense with your team. You're going to be doing probably Zoom calls with Mike McCarthy and the other quarterbacks and the quarterback coaches and the other coaches, and you're going to try to learn that offense, but you're not going to be able to physically do it if you're not all working together on the field. You're not getting those reps in. You're not getting all that in. Same thing with Joe Judge and Joe Daniels. Same thing with Ron Rivera and Dwayne Haskins. You're not able to get that work in. And the fact is, I think the Philadelphia Eagles are the team with the biggest advantage, just solely because the other three teams are all rookie teams. They all have rookie head coaches, and they all have different systems, and you have to adapt to that. And it's going to be hard to do that without an off-season program. So another team I want to look at is the Bengals. Everyone knows they're going to draft Joe Burrow, but will they start Joe Burrow? I have already said that I think that they should start Andy Dalton and let Joe Burrow work his way into learning the offense and throwing to these guys before you toss them in. But will Zach Taylor be able to help Joe Burrow learn the offense quickly? What happens there with the first overall pick? Other quarterbacks like there's suspected landing spots, and I can't say anything because we don't know where Tua or Jordan Love or Justin Herbert are going. But lots of those places have those quarterbacks sitting for at least to start the season, if not maybe sit the entire year, and pull a Patrick Mahomes. Those teams, they are not going to be affected as much. Like if Tua goes to let's just say he goes to the Dolphins, you have Ryan Tannehill starting. If a quarterback like Justin Herbert goes to the Chargers, which is what is predicted in most of the mock drafts, if he goes to the Chargers, you have Tyrod Taylor there. If you have a player like Jordan Love go to, let's just say like the New Orleans Saints or like the Oakland Raiders, you have Derek Carr, you have Drew Brees. If he goes to like the Patriots, you have Jarrett Stidham. And granted, Jarrett Stidham isn't like a great quarterback, but he hasn't proven anything. But you have a quarterback there, and you're not thrusting rookies into that situation. The Bengals are already a situation where they have a guy. I don't know if they're going to keep the guy in Andy Dalton, but do they really want to push Joe Burrow out on the field as quickly as possible, or do they want to wait? Do they want him to learn the offense? We shall see what the Bengals do. The Cardinals are another very interesting team for me. They're staying in the same system. They're a team that could benefit largely from that. It's not a new system. Kyler Murray is staying in the same head coach with Cliff Kingsbury, same offensive coordinator, which is great for his development. And I want to see what the Cardinals can do. The rest of the teams in that division, they're going to be locked in. I think Sean McVay with Jared Goff, that's going to work as well as it can be. Same thing with Kyle Shanahan, Jimmy Garoppolo. Same thing with Pete Carroll and the offensive coordinator down there in Seattle, and Russell Wilson. Those three teams are set. I want to see the fourth one in the NFC West. I want to see if the Cardinals can get their things together. If they can be a great bounce-back team, can they overtake a team like the Rams, and can they stop being like a bottom dweller in the division? Can that offense pop off? Can DeAndre Hopkins and Kyler Murray build a good rapport even with there being no offseason program? That's the third team I really want to look at when it comes to this offseason. And the fourth team I want to look at is the Cleveland Browns. They have a new head coach, former Vikings offensive coordinator, Kevin Stefanski. He's like a run-first guy. But will Baker be able to learn quickly? He's in a pretty similar position to a guy like Dak Prescott and Mike McCarthy, where he has to learn a new offense. He has lots of good offensive weapons around him. Will Baker Mayfield be able to take that step forward? I don't know if I'm on the record for saying this, but I definitely think it. I think Baker Mayfield is going to have a great season going into this year. That's what I thought. I think he's going to work his tail off. I think he's going to be spending less time doing commercials and more time practicing, more time getting back in shape. He bulked last season and gained a lot of weight, and he says that hurt his mobility. And those are stuff he wants to work on. Can he do that without an off-season program? Can he, other than all the personal stuff like losing weight and just working on throwing, can he do that without the off-season program? Can the Browns take a step forward and potentially like prey on this weakness that other teams where they have to learn a new system? Is this going to hit the Browns heavy? Are they going to be in another position similar to last year where they had a head coach who didn't really know what he was doing? And are they going to have another situation like that where it's another year where we hype up the Browns and all that and they fall short of expectations? I don't know. Those are just the four major storylines I'm going to look at when it comes to the offseason program being halted. And yeah, that's all I have for today, you guys. I believe it's episode 14 or 13 of the Fleaflicker NFL Show. Thank you for listening. If you can share this to your friends, that would be a great help. Stay safe, stay healthy, and just stay out of trouble. Bye.